Doing readings from the Boy Scout Handbook, published in 1959. There are two small sections talking about plants. The first is called Woodlore. For the best possible camp experience, you'll probably want to pitch your tent where there are trees. You are fortunate in this respect if you live in a part of the country where large areas are covered with forests. But even in sections where woods are few and far apart, you may succeed in finding a campsite among trees along a river or a lake shore. In the beginning, the trees around you will just be trees, sheltering you against the wind, providing you with fuel for your fires and wood for camp improvements. But soon the trees will become your friends. And as with other friends, you'll want to know more about them. You'll want to call them by their names. Find 10 kinds of wild trees or shrubs. Tell what they are and explain their uses. Knowing the trees, you'll soon learn to know some trees by their shape. The Christmas tree shape of spruces and pines, the vase shape of the elms. The bark will help you tell the sycamores, the birches, and beeches. You can't mistake the leaves of tulip, sassafras, sweet gum, and holly. You'll have no trouble recognizing dogwood, magnolia, redbud, and locust by their flowers. You'll know still other trees by their seeds or fruits, the oaks by their acorns, maples by their winged, quote-unquote, keys. It will help you if you remember that the trees are generally grouped into two large groups. One, the conifers, cone bearers, with needle-like or scale-like leaves that usually stay on the trees for several years, giving them an evergreen appearance. And two, the broadleaf trees, with more or less broad, flat leaves that ordinarily fall off in the autumn, leaving the trees naked throughout the winter. The conifers are the most common forest trees in the west, the broadleafed in parts of the east. Conifers are often referred to as, quote-unquote, softwoods, and the broadleaf trees as, quote-unquote, hardwoods. To name the trees, you'll need a certain amount of memory, but an even greater amount of common sense. We have more than 800 different kinds of trees in the United States. Your common sense will tell you that since some trees like it hot, others cool, some grow in wet soil, others in dry, they won't all be growing in your neighborhood. So find out which trees are important in your section of the country and forget the others for a while. Get someone in the troop who knows about trees to show you the more common local ones. You'll then discover that if you can recognize about a dozen different kinds, you'll know most of the trees you see. Using our forests. The value of our forests cannot be estimated in money. Besides the pleasure that forests give you and other campers, they provide protection against wind erosion, guard our watersheds by holding moisture and regulating the flow of streams, and give food and shelter for wildlife and grazing for livestock. In addition, numerous products we use in our daily lives come from the forests of America. The most important tree product is wood. But don't just think of wood as fuel or building material. Rafters, floors, doors, window sashes. Think of it also in all the other shapes it takes: furniture, boxes and barrels, railroad ties, hulls for light boats, bodies for special planes. Think of it in such hardly recognizable shapes as the newspaper you read, the cellophane around your candy. And remember that other tree products are also important. Fruits and nuts are part of our food. The boiled down sap of the sugar maple gives us maple syrup. Bark from some trees is used for tanning leather. Turpentine for paints comes from pine trees. In spite of the fact that we all depend so much on trees, we have not always played fair with our natural treasures. Past generations of Americans have cut and burned and wasted a large part of our original heritage. Fortunately, all America is waking up to the importance of our forests. As a Boy Scout, you'll be in the forefront of those who are working today to quote-unquote keep America green and our forest resources secure for the future. Some trees are illustrated. Typical hardwoods are black willow, poplar or aspen, birch, hickory, white oak, live oak, sugar maple, and green ash. And then typical softwoods are white pine, black spruce, balsam fir, and red cedar. There is another short section on edible wild plants. In addition to the foodstuffs you bring from home, you may be able to use foodstuffs that nature provides. It is a lot of fun to try and live off the land, making a meal of the fish you catch and the edible wild plants you find around camp. Find at least 4 different edible wild greens, roots, or fruits. Tell what they are and how to prepare them for eating. Salads and greens. The woods and the fields are full of wild materials for salads and leafy green vegetables. Watercress and sheep sorrel can be eaten raw. Other greens need to be cooked. In the spring, cut the shoots of pokeweed and common milkweed when they are just a few inches high. Boil them in enough water to cover. When almost done, pour off the water, pour in fresh water, and boil again until tender. Serve like asparagus. The same method of boiling in 2 changes of water is used for the tender tops of lamb's quarters and stinging nettle, the young stems and leaves of marsh marigold and purslane, the young leaves of curled dock, black mustard, chicory, and dandelion. If you can't find enough of one variety, mix several kinds. Edible grains. Wild rice was an important Indian foodstuff. It grows along swampy stream borders in some of our northern states. The grains ripen in early fall. Collect and dry them. Soak overnight, then boil until tender. Edible roots and tubers. The crisp roots of Indian cucumber can be munched, quote-unquote, as is. They have a pleasant, cucumbery flavor. You'll get plenty of nourishment from the roots or tubers of arrowhead, cattail, prairie apple, groundnut, hog peanut, wild potato vine, Jerusalem artichoke, chufa grass, and the first-year roots of burdock and evening primrose, dug up in the fall. In a pinch, they can be peeled and eaten raw, but they are better boiled or roasted in the coals of your fire. For roasting, first wrap the roots in several layers of large leaves that have been soaked in water. The wet leaves will first steam the roots. Then, as the leaves dry out, the roots will be roasted. Beverages. The red fruit clusters of staghorn sumac make a refreshing, quote-unquote, pink lemonade. Steep them in enough cold water to cover, pour off the liquid, and sweeten to taste. You can make a pleasant hot tea by pouring boiling water over the leaves of spearmint, peppermint, wild bergamot, over the flowers of elderberry and basswood, and over the twigs of spicebush. Tea may also be made on the dried leaves of wild strawberry, sweetbriar, black birch, and wintergreen. An aromatic tea can be brewed on the shredded, dry root bark of sassafras. Sassafras twigs and leaves can also be used, but the tea you get will be somewhat slimy. Dried, toasted, and ground roots of dandelion and chicory are important coffee stretchers or substitutes. Wild desserts. When in season, you can't beat wild berries, fruits, and nuts for a flavorsome dessert. Among berries and fruits, you'll like wild strawberry, red raspberry, blackcap, dewberry, huckleberry, blueberry, cranberry, wild grape, prickly pear. The ripe mayapple fruit appeals to some. Pawpaw and persimmon are good after the first frost. And don't forget the nuts of black walnut, butternut, pecan, hickory, hazel, chestnut, pinyon, and digger pine. And a series of plants are illustrated. Watercress, black mustard, sheep sorrel, pokeweed, milkweed, dandelion, chicory, lamb's quarters, stinging nettle, purslane, marigold, Jerusalem artichoke, chufa grass, burdock, Indian cucumber, arrowhead, cattail, prairie apple, groundnut, hog peanut, elderberry, spearmint, bergamot, staghorn sumac, wintergreen, black birch, basswood, sassafras, spicebush, strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, blueberry, cranberry, wild grape, prickly pear, mayapple, pawpaw, persimmon, black walnut, butternut, chestnut, hazel, hickory, and pinyon.